for offering us 5 minutes. I know you've made an exception and we really appreciate that. My office appreciates that, the community appreciates that. I was just going to preface a little bit about why we are here, and then we have 2 community members who will speak, so we'll share out 5 minutes. So as you know, I'm sure the community has really rallied around the Showbox. A change.org petition was launched just informally by Jay Middleton, and now he has, I think, now nearly 85,000 signatures and counting. It's clearly struck a chord with community members because not only is this an iconic music venue, but it's also it's metaphorical for what's happening in the entire city, where affordable housing and affordable spaces for artists and other working people and small businesses are fast disappearing, and developers are calling the shots. I know that is outside the scope of the board, but my request to you as an elected representative of Seattle's working people is that you use the fullest powers that you have vested in you right now to take into consideration that the community is really urging you to do this. Take into consideration the overwhelming cultural and the social significance, the artistic significance of this space. And now I'll cede to Jay and Harlan.
I want to thank you guys for your time. I started a petition Wednesday afternoon, not even thinking it was going to be this big. And it's overwhelming to see the support from just musicians, artists, and people that just love this venue. This is a space that has created legends, that has left a mark in Seattle history, and some people don't even know it. All the way from Duke Ellington to our grunge heroes of Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. All these bands have touched people's hearts in this city and around the world, and losing this is losing a piece of Seattle's heart, in my opinion. And the last thing I want to see on behalf of the citizens of Seattle is art being ripped out of Seattle by developers just for profit.
Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Harlow. I'm with Rise Up Belltown. We are a community organization meant to preserve parts of Belltown and the bars, the bands, the affordability of the neighborhood, and we've attached ourselves to this because we have the same goals. Belltown has suffered a lot from overdevelopment. We've seen a lot of our local spaces go away, and we would hate to see the Showbox go away too. We're only 5 blocks from Belltown, the overdevelopment of Seattle, the lack of interior landmarks has changed Seattle in a lot of ways to where, people like me, people like, everyone here that just want to have a drink and go see a local band can't really do that anymore. So it's important that we stand up to Ani Group and preserve the Showbox for those reasons.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
We really appreciate all the public comment and really just the engagement from the public in this kind of process. Written comments also are wonderful. Please send your letters to Sarasota.
Dear friends who want to save the Showbox, community members and members of the media, thank you for being here. It's nothing new for us that big developers call the shots in this city. It should be made very clear that this issue is not a conflict. It's not a conflict between affordable housing and preserving cultural spaces. As a matter of fact, working people in this city are losing both affordable housing and cultural spaces, while the only ones who benefit are big developers, land speculators, property management corporations, all of whom make off with huge profits. Rather than affordable housing, the Ani Group, the real estate corporation, will be building 442 upscale units in a high-rise building where the Showbox stands today. Artists in Seattle are in fact in need of both affordable housing and affordable spaces to perform and share their art with other people. The Showbox is an iconic venue. It captures Seattle's quintessential spirit. I'm joined today by many community members, including Jay Middleton, whose change.org petition now has over 84,000 signatures and counting. Hundreds have emailed my office. Thanks to all of you for reaching out. Thanks to Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for Cutie, who called my office about this. I want to thank journalists, DJs, and many other artists and community members who have taken up this cause like their life depends on it, because it does. Earlier this week, my office added our voice to the tens of thousands who have already done so to oppose Ani's plans to demolish the Showbox and build high-rise luxury apartments in its place. The city's Landmark Preservation Board members who are meeting today have kindly afforded us 5 minutes on their agenda for public testimony, during which I hope those of you who are here will lay out the reasons why the community values the Showbox and why you believe that the board should nominate the structure for landmark status, both the facade and its continued use as a music venue. We're not talking about just preserving a door frame or a chandelier. We're talking about preserving the music venue. Since we heard from hundreds of you, my office has done a lot of research on this issue this week. There are no straightforward, clear legislative tools, but we do know there are several avenues we can take, and I can promise you my office will be exploring every tool that is at our disposal to its fullest potential. And I will go over them briefly here, but let me say, the only real power we can bring to save the Showbox is for the public campaign to keep getting organized. Yep. Because otherwise, we know the writing is on the wall. Who wins? It's the big developers, it's the moneyed interest. Community does not win. There are examples where community has won, but that was when the community was absolutely determined and built an organized fighting campaign. We are following in that tradition. Seattle icons like the Pike Place Market and the views from the Space Needle have been protected. But it was precisely through a fighting campaign against developers and politicians that the Pike Place Market was preserved. It was ordinary people, it was working people, small businesses, architects and planners who all agreed that Pike Place Market is precious to us and that we would not let it get bulldozed just to make yet more profits for the big guys. So it was with voter initiative in 1971, and I have a copy of that voter initiative with me here. It was with voter initiative in 1971 that Pike Place got its landmark historic status, with nearly 60% of the city voting for it. That was an unlikely victory, with the community going against the big money corporations, but the community ultimately won that battle because we put up a serious fight. That is what will be needed if we want to save the Showbox. We also want to make sure that throughout this struggle, the voice of the workers at the Showbox are heard, the workers who work there currently. Because the interests of those of us who want to preserve this iconic venue are deeply intertwined with those of us fighting for workers' rights and for affordable housing. They go together. My office is preparing a resolution to urge the Landmark Preservation Board to nominate the Showbox for landmark status, both facade and its continued use as a music venue. Obviously, the board has certain objective criteria, but it is true that one of their criteria is the question of overwhelming cultural and historic significance, and there is no question. We have about 100,000 Seattleites saying this venue matters to us and we want to keep it. That is what overwhelming cultural and historic significance means. So I am earnestly hoping that the City Council will take that view to when the resolution comes forward. My office has also discussed with the City Attorney's Office and the Department of Construction and Inspections, and based on those conversations, we are also working on an ordinance to extend the boundaries of the Pike Place Historic District to encompass the Showbox. Incidentally, the current boundary to the Pike Place Historic District is literally across the street from the Showbox. It's also useful for us to know that the Pike Place Historic District boundaries have been extended twice in the past, in the 1980s. So this ordinance will not be treading any new legal ground. It has been done before, it can be done again. We are also exploring whether the law could be updated to bolster the powers of the Landmarks Preservation Board to preserve iconic spaces and structures and their uses, so like preserving this as a music venue. So we are looking into it, but we don't have any answers there yet. We will keep exploring it. But most urgently, As I said, we will be working on the resolution and the ordinance to extend the Pike Place boundaries. I just very quickly wanted to quote Eugenia Wu, who is with the Historic Seattle organization, and they tell us that there is actually need to revamp the powers of the Landmarks Preservation Board. According to Eugenia, the ordinance in its current state does not afford the opportunity to protect a property's use as much as we wish we did, as much as we wish it did. The limitations of the Landmarks Ordinance are on display in this case. So, in addition to the resolution urging the Landmarks Preservation Board to preserve this location as a music venue, in addition to the ordinance that will extend the boundaries of the Pike Place Market Historic District, we are also talking about exploring this law to bolster the ability of the board to extend the historic status to various structures. But for any of this, as I said before, we will need your voice in City Hall to win it. My office will keep you posted on when the resolution is ready. But we have to be sober. We cannot assume that the City Council will automatically support this because we think it's a good idea or because even 100,000 people think it's a good idea. We have to remember this is a question that pits the profits of the Oni Real Estate Corporation against the desires of community members and working people. So let's make sure we follow the example of the Pike Place Market. There is still a lot of organizing for us to do. In the words of Ben Gibbard, we are not going to take this lying down. I wanted to introduce Jay Middleton, who launched the petition, the Change.org petition. He wanted to say a few words, so please welcome Jay.
Can you say your name?
My name's Jay Middleton. I started this petition, not even thinking that 100 people were going to sign it, and now at 11 a.m. when I printed this out, there was 84,227. It's probably more than that. I want to thank everybody who signed it, everybody from the Showbox that reached out to me, council members Sawant for reaching out to me, because we got to get together, we got to connect together and use each other's tools to help make this happen. We just got to go at this with love for the Showbox. That's how we're going to win this thing. We got to have a lot of love for the Showbox and show the Ani Company that we're frustrated with culture, history, art being ripped away from this city by developers. And we're not going to stand for this as artists, as music lovers, as just citizens of Seattle. We got to stand up for this. This is history, and we don't want it taken away. Thank you.
Shana, a couple questions.
Can I, thank you, Jay. We have one more speaker, and then I'm happy to take questions, except for we have to watch out for when we go to the board meeting. But we do have Nate Omdahl, who is a performer and represents the Musicians Union.
Hey Nate, could you say and spell your name?
Absolutely. My name is Nate Omdahl, Nateomdal, and I am the lead organizer for the Musicians Union here in Seattle, Local 76493. And I'd just like to say that the musical community that I've been lucky enough to represent is really, really passionate about saving the Showbox. We would also just like to mention that we think this is a really exciting opportunity to refocus on the arts production businesses that already exist in Seattle, that are already hyper-local. And there's a lot of issues that we feel are being brought up with this issue of the Showbox being sold and renovated. Cultural, economic, workplace, the musicians in town are all really committed to seeing something like the Showbox preserved here in Seattle, but we would also like to acknowledge that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done for our industry, for regulations, for oversight, for enforcement of present workplace laws that are kind of going a little under the rug. And just as much opportunity as we can to be a part of active community solutions. And I know every musician I've spoken to is really invested in seeing that the Showbox is here to stay, but also here to stay for the next coming decade or decades or whatever however we want to count the time. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Council member, isn't there a way to build over and around it and keep the Showbox preserved?
What's that?
Isn't there a way to have our cake and eat it too, build over and around it and preserve the Showbox?
How many cases have you seen that happening where the developers get their cake and the community gets to keep its location? I think it is very clear that for the Oni Group, it is in order for them to build a high-rise building, a tower of luxury units. I don't know that there's space there. I mean, I welcome you to ask the Oni Group to see what they can do, but I'm not holding my breath because I have not seen any example of our iconic locations being preserved just by discussing with the developers. That's not how it works. We have to fight for it. But I absolutely welcome the Oni Group if they have any real ideas as to how we can build affordable housing and we can keep the Showbox as a performance venue.
Can you explain what powers you would want to see the Landmark Preservation Board get that it doesn't have now and how that could change this situation?
To be honest with you, we're still exploring that option. It's not something that we have really made headway into because this is something just ideas that were suggested by community members yesterday, including members of Historic Seattle, and I read you the quote from them. I would say that it has to do with the fact that it's one thing for the Preservation Board to have the ability to nominate a structure for maintaining the facade. It's quite another to maintain it for its use, because when you start talking about the use of a venue is when you really start seeing a conflict between what big developers want and what the community wants. I mean, maintaining the facade is one thing, They could still build an upscale luxury apartment unit building and maintain the facade, but that is not what the community is demanding. The community is very clear. We want this to be maintained as a music venue. And so when you start talking about that, my understanding is that the law is not fully equipped to address that, but I also don't want you to take my word for it at this second because we're still looking into it, and we will keep the media updated as we find out.
Shama, we sat down with Eugenia Wu this afternoon and talked to her about that. She said that the council would need to basically work on its own ordinance to give the landmarks.
That is what we're
board,
talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Its ability to
yes.
do that. And so, are you drafting legislation?
That was the third thing that I mentioned that we're working on. But that's not the most immediate thing because that is going to need more work. The most immediate things that are coming up are the resolution, because the resolution, even though it does not have an actual power over what the Oni Group does, what we do want to do and what the Landmarks Preservation Board does, what we do want to do is to have the resolution, because you've seen resolutions in the past, they proclaim the position of the city of Seattle, and it's a lot of, it provides a lot of impetus to a movement or a struggle when it is able to force the city council to take a formal, unified position on an issue. So that's the goal of bringing a resolution forward. A resolution will mean that the city council is urging the Landmarks Preservation Board to use their full authority at this moment to try and nominate the Showbox for landmark status.
Are you afraid that this might take too long?
Okay, so just one second. Yeah, that's an important question. I'll come to that. And we are also working, as I said, my office has started working on an ordinance that will extend the Pike Place market boundaries. That is a more immediate thing. And we're working on the third thing as well, but I can't give you more definitive information because I don't have it yet. So we have to find out.
The process might be, is it going to be long?
That is a very important question. This time, Vancouver and South Lake Union, in Seattle and so on. So they no doubt have the personnel and a battery of land use attorneys who can and will expedite their paperwork. That is why we thought it was urgent to bring the community together today, even though it's not the easiest time. 3 p.m. on a work day is not the easiest time for working people to show up to. That is why I especially appreciate those of you who have come here today. But it is urgent to keep building momentum for this campaign because, yes, it's a race against time. And I don't know what will happen. Ultimately, the strength of our movement will, against the Oni Group will decide what happens.
I know the city has pushed really hard to have these developers include affordable housing in a lot of these developments, but you're saying within this development itself, you've reviewed the plans and there's absolutely no affordable.
Well, the Oni Group has not talked about affordable housing at all. Obviously, the city has the program of the mandatory housing affordability but as Briar Dudley's column in the Seattle Times shows, and I don't often agree with the Seattle Times columnist, but you know what? He is spot on. That the Seattle City Council and the mayor's office have not actually used the MHA capability to the fullest potential it could use, and that doesn't mean that we don't want affordable housing. We want every unit of affordable housing that we can win, but the Oni Group has not talked about affordable housing here. These are upscale units, and my challenge to the City Council is this: if you're really interested in building affordable housing, why did you repeal the Amazon tax? Why aren't you speaking out against the King County Council giving away $185 million to the billionaire John Stanton instead of investing in affordable housing? There are lots of avenues that the City Council can and should take on affordable housing, but pitting affordable housing against cultural venues, that is not the way to go. In fact, both are going down at the same time, so we need to win both together. I think we're under time pressure.
Now you guys are going to go talk to the landmark.
But they're having their own meetings. They're not going to like clash their meetings. But my office has talked to them, and they have allowed the community.
And this is Paul Ingram. He is not only a fan of the Showbox, but is in his own band, Garage Heroes, out of Paulsville. Paul, I didn't ask you what instrument you play.
I'm lead singer, guitar player, and harmonica.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
All right, so you're almost like a John Popper kind of...
No,
Not quite. Okay.
Heavy 70s style rock.
Okay,
Yeah.
so more Billy Joel.
No.
Not even that. I'm trying to
Black Sabbath,
harmonica
Led
guy.
Zeppelin, you know that.
I don't remember Black Sabbath playing the harmonica,
yeah.
but I guess
The
Ozzy
Wizard.
does.
The
Ozzy
Wizard,
does.
yeah.
Of course. So you've been helping to gather
Yeah.
signatures. I think the most obvious question is, what is it about Showbox that makes it worth preserving to you?
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful venue. Best sound in town. It's the best rock experience I think you can have in the Seattle area, certainly. Probably beyond Seattle. It has a lot of rich heritage. I mean, my history with Seattle rock, going back into the 90s, obviously, 80s, there's a lot of great memories in the Showbox, and continue today. I mean, anytime there's a show there that, I try and look down that list and see if I can get there. My wife and I used to go to they had a Zoot Suit Sunday swing dance thing on Sunday nights. We went there every Sunday. So it's not just about rock music, loud music. I mean, it's a great place to just be, kind of no matter who's playing. And so I've been there with small crowds, and I've been there with the place packed. And I got to say, I mean, I just don't think that there's anything like it in our area. Certainly, it has a great association with the Seattle rock scene, and it's just a shame to consider that might not be, especially given how much we already have in the way of residents downtown here.
Well, what's your sense that there might actually be a success and it'll be preserved as a landmark?
Well, I think that it seems reasonable that it could be preserved. I don't know what that piece of square footage. I mean, there's plenty of sky above it. I would think that there's ways that we can preserve, just like we preserve many other important landmarks in our community. There's ways to preserve it. It's just a matter of whether they want to, view it as valuable enough to do so.
And go to the extra expense of construction around it rather than just knocking it down.
Yeah. I mean, it's as important as any landmark we have here in Seattle.
Well, what's your take on now the developer saying that they want to enter it into landmark status or nominate it? I mean, what do you think of this move by them?
Yeah, well, I think that for them to do so, obviously that's a great statement of their their interest in the community. I would definitely do everything we can do to preserve it. Obviously there's plenty there's plenty around it that maybe is less historical. I can understand that there's a whole block involved probably, and I've seen from my own offices and viewpoints in the town, we've seen a lot of buildings go all the way down to the below ground levels, and I understand there's a lot of value down below, but in this particular case, this area, with the market right across the street, there's just there's just too much going on in that part of our downtown area. It would kind of be like ripping the heart out of us.
And you just touched on the last thing I was going to ask you, and that's when you're talking about the spirit of a place like that.
Yeah.
What's lost when it goes away?
Well, I mean, it's a visible landmark, and when you're downtown and when you're not downtown, you know it's there. I mean, it's just part of coming downtown. For me, I mean, to walk through downtown and not look up and see what's coming up, it would be a giant miss. You know, it's just a part of our lifestyle. So not having the Showbox in town, I think, you know, removes a goal for a guy like me in a band. Also, you know, and also I think it could continue to you know, to hurt some of the nightlife that we're trying to boost, you know, as artists downtown, and you know, there's a great opportunity too to maintain, you know, a level of artistry and keep our nightlife alive through activities down at the Showbox.
All right, Paul Ingram, frontman for the band out of Paulsville, Garage Heroes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.